Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 126, and I'm happy to have Alex Corticals with me yet again, and we're going to be revisiting our MH3 set review. Before that, thanks to my patrons. Nothing new to report, but hopefully next week, maybe. And thanks to MTGA Zone for supporting me with my streaming and with my seminars. With that out of the way, let's introduce our guest. Although I don't know if Alex needs an introduction. You know him from streaming. I'm there in the chat quite frequently, so I can vouch for his streaming. It's the one that I watch the most. I've recently crossed the 50 months of being a subscriber through Alex's streams, so that's how much invested I am, because I think that this is the place where I learn how to play. I can learn the card evaluation from the data. I can't learn how to play from the data. And it's always nice to watch Alex because he's super clear, entertaining, and gives a very good kind of roundup of what is going on. I always ask him dumb questions and wait for the answer. And he always patiently explains to me why he picked a different line than I did, and is 95% of the time correct. There you go.
Well, I appreciate that. I love dumb questions. Don't worry, keep the dumb questions coming. I don't consider them dumb, and if you do, well, I mean, that's okay. I can stomach a dumb question once in a while.
I mean, I don't think they are dumb for me, but you might be just tired of the obvious.
Oh, absolutely not.
What else do we have? You podcast limited level ups. Another like solid point on my weekly podcast schedule. Especially like with the set review coming up next week, I guess. I love the set reviews, but I think that the strongest point that you have in the previous season is this very brief set review that like sort of like 1 hour sweet talk where you can catch up on everything before the pre-release.
Yeah.
So that's coming up.
Yep, indeed.
Coaching.
That too. We do it all. We do it if you have some sort of limited content, limited something, or coaching, podcast, YouTube, Twitch. If you watch somebody somewhere doing that, I probably do it as well. So
there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, yeah, a good person. I keep on repeating that, but Alex is a very kind, generous person in the community, and that's one of the reasons why it's worth supporting him. But also, like, apart from being nice, Alex is a cutthroat card evaluator, and that's why we have him here.
It's true.
It's this ability to evaluate cards in vacuum that Alex has that I enjoy the most. And I always thought that the weakest point of Alex's evaluations is agreeing with the person that he's running the set review with. So I thought, how about we cut that second person and let Alex evaluate cards in complete vacuum? I evaluate my cards in complete vacuum. And then some months after, we take both our set reviews with the grade scale that I'm going to explain in a second, and compare them and see where we went wrong, because those grades we give are based on the 17 lands win rate. So we can go to that. But before we go to that, I selected a warm-up pack, and I thought it's quite an interesting one. It has 2 rares. That's already exciting.
Nice.
But let's go with the commons just to see where we are. What mainly you, honestly, how you feel about the set. And I'm going to start with the commons and move on to the rares in the weird order. So first is the Kami of Jealous Thirst, the 1/3 Death Toucher that for 5 mana drains 2, but most of the time it costs 0.
I play a lot of this card, but I play a lot of blue-black, and I think it's really the only place you should play it, and I think it's a pretty good card there. So not a first pick by any means, but I like the card and I play it quite a bit.
No, that's like a card that you are super happy to see somewhere around the wheel, no?
Yes.
Because that means that your archetype is quite likely open, and it's a good card in the deck. Corrupted Shapeshifter, the 3/3 flyer. 2/5 vigilance. I mean 0/12 wall.
This
so
is
much
a card
choice.
I am so proud to say that I've never played it. I don't think I've ever put it in a deck. Happy to wipe my hands clean of this card. It's a weird one. It just seems like out of place in a format that has a bunch of super high power stuff. Weird that they put a very weak card in the set, to be blunt.
Yeah, that would be like okay in standard kind of
Yeah.
set, I guess. Not great even, probably just like merely okay, and probably
Playable.
not in every archetype.
Right.
It is. I think I might have played it once, but I was not happy about it by any stretch of imagination.
I will say the one thing that I think that has purpose is that a sideboard card against Writhing Chrysalis, because it does block Big Eldrazi pretty well, but that's about it.
That's true. It will block Kozilek even, so
Yeah,
that's
sure.
for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Bountiful Landscape.
Yeah, I mean, these landscapes I've kind of ebbed and flowed on as the format's gone on. I started taking them really highly, and then I kind of dipped down on them, and then I kind of ended up somewhere in the middle where, it's definitely fine to speculate on these lands, but there's a lot of them. They fly around the table. There's also the uncommon fixing, so it's nice that they exist. And at the beginning of the format, I would have said, "Oh, Bountiful Landscape." The most important one, I did say this a lot, most important one because it's the Teamer colorless land. And sure, I think it's probably still true, but it ended up being the case that, I don't think my Eldrazi decks were actually super 3 colors all that much. And also, you kind of pick up a blue-green-black land or a red-blue-white land and kind of did the same job for you. So they're fine. And good, cool, interesting part of the format, but nothing special.
So I did a bunch of like stats on those landscapes and on the MDFCs actually, and one thing that popped out on me while doing that is that their win rate is sort of proportional to the number of colors they physically fix, and that's why the Teamer one is the best one, because it fixes for 4 colors most of the time,
right?
Because 3 plus colorless.
Yep.
And once they fix for 3-4 colors, then they are okay. But I think it is a slight mistake to get too many of them when they only fix for 2 colors, especially when you're not interested in strictly colorless cards. So that was the sort of take-home message from the landscapes. And of course, in best of one, they will lead to the situation where the number of games where you mulligan with the landscapes in your deck decreases the more landscapes you put. But despite mulliganing less, you're winning less as well, because at a certain point, if you have too many of them, you get stuck on those 4 or 5 lands and you cannot draw the 6th one because you filtered your deck a bit too much. So they run with the problem of my mana is good in terms of color but not in terms of quantity, and best of one is specifically best of one that's problematic. Still, I mean, it's the best one of the all, so not first pickable probably, and especially not from this pack, but a decent one. What do you think about Fanged Flames, the 2 mana deal 4 and exile something?
Yeah, it ended up being okay minus even. Like, it's a card I would take if I was a little bit low on interaction, and I think this is a format where you wanted to have some interaction even in your aggro decks, 4 or 5 removal spells maybe. So if I was below that, I would take the card reasonably highly in pack 2, pack 3, but sorcery speed, dealing 4, exile mattered sometimes. It was really good at dealing with certain threats, like the Worm Coil Larva. Really nice thing to line up against that, but it just was kind of vanilla enough as a removal spell that I didn't take it that highly.
Yeah, I always get like hit on something really, really good, and when I play it, I never find like a when you think about it, this is like a strictly better. What was the 2 mana normal deal for exile something?
Lava Coil?
Lava Coil, and then the second one, Oblivion something.
Yeah,
Obliterating Bolt, Obliterating
Brothers
Bolt.
War, yeah.
Yeah. It's strictly better than either of the 2, which were at uncommon, and somehow this card is just sort of like a meh filler, which is weird, because this set is not particularly more powerful than your average set, I would say. I mean, you see some absolutely busted things, but average power level of the common is not like something super impressive.
No, it's true, and I think that's something that going into this set, a lot of people, myself included, sort of assumed, like, it's going to be, or at least before all the cards came out, like, oh, this is a Modern Horizons set. It's going to be that much more powerful. And, Modern Horizons 1 was a lot more powerful than, what was that at the time? Dominaria, or OG Dominaria, or maybe it was a little bit later than that. But, we're 5 years back at this point. It was way more powerful. now standard set designs caught up to the modern Masters or modern Horizons style sets, and they're not that much different. So yeah, definitely interesting.
How much more powerful this card would have been as an instant? Because 4 damage is so annoying because they play Chrysalis and you can't kill it. If it was
Yeah.
instant, they sacrifice the spawn in response to the trigger, you play it and kill the Chrysalis. The card would have been, what, 2 grades better just by that being able to do that?
Yeah, I think instant's just a huge thing. Like that's something, we're talking about card evaluation on these episodes and things that you want to bring to future formats and future evaluating cards. This is something that, as many things that I have in the past, picked up from Sam Black, and a lot of things that I kind of had known, but hearing somebody say it, that's a good player, just really kind of codifying it. And Sam makes a big distinction between instant and sorcery, because instants can be used obviously in response to combat tricks or auras, get a blowout in combat with double blocks. And after I kind of heard that just being said out loud, and obviously instants are better than sorceries, but just the number of situations they are better, I really bumped down sorcery speed removal spell in my books, unless they are just like amazing. They give you some sort of value.
Oh, Jason in the chat is postulating instead of making it an instant, just make it deal 5.
I would agree with that.
Or call me crazy, just make Chrysalis make only 1 spawn. I mean,
yeah, I would agree with that too.
No, I obviously set you up a bit because that would be interesting to see how the Fel, the uncommon thing from Bloomborough, is going to work out. It's a 2 mana, Hero's Downfall, but it's a sorcery speed one.
Yep.
So, which I think will make it significantly worse, even in the standard set, than if it would be even a 3 mana instant version of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one will play out. On the other hand, Claim the Precious was fine for 3 mana at sorcery speed, and no one cried about it. So maybe
that one gave you some value though. So that one gave you a little bit of something.
All right, Scurrilous Sentry. Is it going on the same pile as the cameo of Jealous Thirst?
No, I think it goes actually a little bit higher. This is a card I've come up on quite a bit. Like, it is good in blue-black, but all of I've been drafting black a lot in the last 2 weeks of the format, and I've just been high on like black mid-rangey, grindy decks that just use this card to kind of filter your draws and have a pretty good threat, and maybe Eviscerator's Insight to get a little bit of card advantage. And it just kind of slots right in. It's a good threat. It has a good into the battlefield effect. It's often a must kill, or not like a must kill, but your opponent feels pressured to kill it. So I like the card quite a bit.
All right. Void Pouncer, the 2 mana 3/1 Eldrazi that can be kicked into a Skizik.
Oh yeah, that is what it is, isn't it? I didn't even realize that. Yeah, it's okay. It's more in the commie pile than anything else. Like, generally these days when you draft an Eldrazi deck, it is very difficult to get 24 great playables, and sometimes you need a filler card, and sometimes you need a 2, and that's what Pouncer is.
I mean, speak for yourself. I just draft 6 Chrysalises and move on with my life.
Oh well, of course, yeah. They have, Sirgovich just has the privilege of always opening Chrysalises whenever he wants, and things are awesome.
It is, I think, like an important card if you build the sort of lower to the ground Eldrazi aggro. Mm-hmm. Like, if you have a line breaker and you have a couple of Void Pouncers, you can actually go out of the blocks quite quickly with those decks. But it's a complete different deck than your average Eldrazi, I would say. Metastatic Evangel.
Yeah, so this is the 2 mana 3/1 that whenever a non-token enters, you proliferate. It was a funny card because it's a good card. Let's just put it, straightforward, not bury the lead here. You think of it in like the green-white modified deck or like white-X modified decks proliferating your counters, and that deck didn't really pan out. Maybe you drafted it once every 15 drafts or something like that. But it was good with some specific cards. Like when you had the white 3-drop that comes in, puts a counter on something, that was always pretty decent. It's pretty good with any of the black-green cards that say whenever you put a counter on this thing, you do a thing. I had an opponent had a really nice black-white deck where they had this card and the Emperor of Bones, which like reanimates something whenever you put a counter on it. And they had Essence Reliquary, so they were just like doing all these loops. So you can definitely do some cool stuff. And of course, it proliferates energy too. It would probably be the pick out of the pack for me right now, but it's not like not quite a premium uncommon.
Yeah, it's a weird card because actually when I looked at its sort of grade in the whole set, it was a C. But I don't think I don't think I would evaluate it as a C for myself.
Right.
But I think it has a wide range of how good it will become. I honestly, when you were talking about the white green decks, I tried it several times and it sort of worked from great to pretty good. I tried the
Okay.
more grindy white green decks where
Right.
I combined Evangels with the Evolution Witness and then
Yep.
sort of start outgrinding it because I cast a creature, reanimate another permanent, whatever, sacrifice a land, I build up my
Yep.
mana base, and it all like with couple of Evolution Witnesses and couple of Evangels, it becomes a sort of like almost deterministic where I build up the board that they can't do anything outside of wrathing me basically, and you win those longer games. So there's also that option.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Right, stump.
Yeah, this is one of the better MDFCs, the uncommon ones. Just pretty good spell on the front side. It was the land for the best deck in the format, or one of them anyways. And so yeah, nothing to complain about. This would now be my current pick out of the pack.
Yeah, I think so. Path to Annihilation.
Well, forget that, because now we're taking Path to Annihilation, because Path is really busted. It's kind of like one of those fundamentally broken Magic cards. I think in one of my earlier episodes of limited level ups for this format, I likened it to Fires of Invention, which is the card I guess is now like 5 years old. So maybe not a lot of people know what Fires of Invention is, but for those who do, it's got that same effect where you cast this and then you get to cast another card the same turn generally. So it almost feels like it's free and just gives you this gigantic mana boost. So really, really strong card.
Yeah, it is always a groan test for me.
Yep.
The Path of Annihilation on turn 3 or something, and just
absolutely,
like that game is going to be uphill. I know already. Frogmere Enforcer. We can move on from that, I assume.
Yeah, even in black red, this was not a very good card. I think I could go on about how the black red artifact deck could have been tweaked slightly. I think to be a bit more cohesive. But we don't have to. We have a lot to talk about today, so maybe for another day.
Okay, we have also the rare is Genku the Future Shaper, the blue-white 2/5. Whenever a permanent leaves, permanent or creature, permanent you control leaves battlefield. Yeah,
yep.
You can choose one of the variety of token creatures, like including a flyer, vigilance, and the lifelinker, and also something I always forget. You can pay 5 to put a counter on everything that you have, which is a pain. Which is one of the features, I guess.
Yeah, card is pretty good. I don't think it's good as good as card as Path of Annihilation, and I would probably take that second here. But Path is just great, so that would be my pick.
But wait, there's more. We still have the special slot.
Oh, that's right. We have another rare here.
The reprint, the Barbarian Ring. We can move on with our lives without picking Barbarian Ring. Maybe with a warning to not put Barbarian Ring easily into your deck, which probably means never. But we also have 6. And that's an interesting pick between Path of Annihilation and 6.
Yeah, it is definitely the kind of pick where if you just coin tossed and gave me one, I'd be like, yep, okay, pretty happy. But when I'm actually faced with the decision, what do I take? I kind of feel the same. I would definitely tank on it a little bit and probably end up with the 6. I think it's a little bit worse than Path, but
just
a lot more
gems.
flexible. Yeah, for the 20 gems, exactly. I'm really hurting lately.
Well, value is value over time.
Value is value.
But yeah, 6. The card is, again, I never had pleasure of doing anything useful with it because whenever I play it, I will get something like Fanged Flames. But against me, the card was just absolutely oppressive.
Yeah, it's great.
And I did play it in the cube yesterday, in the new Arena Cube, and it was phenomenal there because I could recast some really great spells. So it's even better probably in cube than in the normal set because the quality of stuff that you're retracing from your graveyard is insane.
Yep, indeed. And there's also like a little more ways to get things in the graveyard a little easier than in this set maybe.
Yeah, well, it is great that it does it on its own if you need to. So we end up on 6.
Yeah, I think I would take 6.
This is like a really good pack when you think about it, because even the sixth person will get a decent card from here, because you got what? 6, Path, Genku, Stump, Evangel, and then you go to like Landscape and Sentry, which are still decent cards, I guess. So
yeah, I think so too. And then the 7th person gets really sad because the rest of the cards are not so great, but that's okay.
well, except for this one Dimir player that still gets the Kami.
That's true. The Kami player is
exactly where you want to get Kami also. So that's fine. All right, this was just to get us a bit refreshed about the format and get ready for the actual set re-review. As I said, our grading scale is based on the game in hand win rate, based on all the sets since Midnight Hunt, basically, as it was released. But of course, different sets have different win rates, and comparing one set that has a 54% average win rate with another set that has a 56% win rate is difficult, because you don't compare apples with apples, but apples with oranges or something. So the solution to that is, when you have sets that have a different win rates, and the distribution of the win rates is going to be looking sort of like quasi-normal. I mean, probably it's going to be skewed in one direction or another. But the solution is to sort of pull those curves into the same spot and make them 50% average, and then those curves should overlap and be comparable. So when the card is in the middle in one set, it's going to be also in the middle in the other set, sort of. And mathematically, that's relatively straightforward to do. And then based on that, I did it for many sets, and I looked at where, sort of semi-arbitrarily, where different grades should be. And then if the normalized win rate, so after I did the mathematical shenanigans, if that win rate is above 60%, it's going to be an A+. And here we have Guide of Souls, which was an example from this set, the only A+ in the Modern Horizons 3. And Aurelia's Vindicator from Murders in Karlov Manor, because we didn't have a single example of an A+ in OTJ. Weirdly, in a bomb-heavy set, nothing was an A+. Then we have Alex. You can go with the second one.
Yeah, we've got the A's. So some examples. A's are Writhing Chrysalis, everybody's favorite purple people eater in this set, and very funny putting these side by side. But Bonnie Paul from I mean, OTJ.
I put them side by side because they're the same card.
Yeah, basically just like gigantic things, make multiple bodies, makes your opponent can see on the spot, right?
And reach. Don't forget.
Yes. Oh, true. And reach. Yeah, of course. The most important part. These are cards with win rates between 57 and 60%.
Also, Chrysalis, since Midnight Hunt, we had 2 A- at common. Chrysalis is the first card that got into A grade at common. So that's something. Before that, we had Inspiring Overseas and Printing Champion at A-, and this one smashed the result. Okay, then we have like A-, win rate between 55 and 57, and we have Gisa the Hellraiser from OTJ and Psychic Frog from this set. Great example of a card that is probably punching above the archetype's weight. It was definitely like the Dimir decks with the Psychic Frogs are just that little bit stronger than if they wouldn't have it.
Then we got the B+. We've got Path of Annihilation and Lassoed by the Law. So that was the game that Sirkovitz has me play. Like, what are the similarities between these two cards? And here we've got 2 4-mana enchantments that were very, very good in value generating. So the B+ is here. Win rates between 53.5 and 55%.
Then we have a B. I wonder if you will notice the similarities between those two cards. B's will be between 52.5 and 53.5% of the normalized win rate. And we have Horrific Assault, the bite spell from MH3. And we have Throw from the Saddle, a bite spell from OTJ, with very similar win rates, actually. But once Throw from the Saddle was the top common from the whole set, Horrific Assault is probably like 4th best green common or something like that.
Yeah, which really speaks to the quality of the green commons in the set, because this is a great card.
Chrysalis is technically Grow, but let's give it the honorary title. But
yeah. And then next up, we've got B-. So we've got Royal Cartographer from MH3 and Vault Plunderer from OTJ, and what is the similarity here? The rogues? They're rogues with 1 and 3 in their text boxes? Is that
drawing cards?
drawing cards? Sure. Okay, I was looking at the wrong things. They have 2 words in their names.
I
How
mean,
about
the
that?
3-1 and 1-3 is also like part of it, but I couldn't find anything really relevant, so I had to improvise.
Yeah, there's nothing too similar. Anyways, B minuses have a normalized win rate of 51.5 to 52.5%.
Yeah. Then we have the C pluses. Now I found it. We have territory color and Cactarantula. Win rates between 50.5 and 51.5. As you can see, massive creatures with reach for 5 mana. And yes, Cactarantula costs 5 mana. Oh, yep. Yeah, reach again. I mean, by the way, this sort of made me realize that territory color is most of the time exactly the same as Cactarantula with 1 extra power. Because most of the time you cast it, you play the land, you maybe drew that card, and then they killed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same with Cactarantula. Only with Cactarantula, they tried to avoid killing it and trade it in combat, while territory color was a magnet for removal, but allowed you to hopefully draw that 1 card once you played it, because you had the priority and you could play a land and get the landfall trigger. But it shocked me because I never connected how similar those 2 cards are before I started making those slides.
Yeah, me neither. And it's interesting. Like we were talking about the power level of Modern Horizons versus a normal draft set these days, and how it's not like that much different. Well, number one, you can see these cards are pretty similar, but the where they're willing to push it is that 7th point of power. That's the big thing.
But I mean, for me, when I saw territory color and I saw the stats, and I thought, like, this is an insane stat line.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at Cactarantula and I say, well, that's all right, I guess. Because that 6 mana and the cost, it sort of doesn't make me think that it costs 5 mana like 95% of the time.
Right.
So I don't make that connection that it's a 6/5 for 5 mana with bunch of pluses that will probably draw me a card, which would make me evaluate it higher. And of course, there is this like ceiling on territory color. If it doesn't get challenged, then you're going to draw like 3-4 cards of it. But that happens rarely, and usually you win that game quite easily. C grade, we have win rate of between 49.25 to 50.5. Yes, they are very specific because I had to make the cutoffs of to make the curve look quasi-normal. We got Twisted Riddle Keeper from this set and Jailbreak Scheme from OTJ, basically selected on the capacity of turning off some creatures, but I didn't have a very good comparison. Maybe I should have picked the 4/5 Eldrazi that taps something, stuns something. I think that was in the same kind of C grade.
We got C minuses up next. We've got Reiterating Bolt, which is probably one of the bigger misses, I think, in the set review. Just to look forward a little bit here. This is the 2 mana deal 3 that you can replicate by playing 3 energy. Thought that card was going to be busted. Ended up being okay. And Explosive Derailment is our OTJ card. So C minuses in the win rate range between 48% and 49.25%.
Maybe with the caveat that Derailment was weak because red was weaker.
Yeah.
And Reiterating Bolt is because it rarely is what you think it will be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a D pluses that between 46.75 and 48% win rate on the normalized scale. We have Deep Muck, Desperado, and we have Reform.
Both two sea animals or aquatic animals that also have the theme of people really wanted to make these cards work. And
that's exactly the theme, by the way.
Great, yeah.
Not the sea creature, although it does sort of align, but it was mainly that these cards were sort of easy to conceive but hard to produce build-arounds. And both of those cards actually were performing way better in the hands of top players than in the hands of lower win rate players. So that's another similarity that they have, because top players are much more crafty with making the build-around work as it should be.
Yeah, I actually had an example with the Reform the other day where somebody was showing me, I was in a coaching session and somebody was showing me their draft logs, and they took a Reform when they were in blue-black, and they looked at, to inform that decision, they were like, oh, I was looking at stats on 17 lands, and in blue-black, Reform performs better than it does in other decks. And I think the explanation to that is because people have Chthonian Nightmare with it, is what I would suggest, So one of those kind of tricky things where you can't always just be like, oh, it's good in this deck, I guess just to take it. You gotta
Yeah,
know the specifics.
that's why I always advocate for a bit more context in looking at the data and not just blindly following, because that's exactly the kind of traps you're going to be falling into.
Exactly.
And then you start putting a white-green deck into your green-red deck because it has high stats, but without realizing that it was splashing for a white bomb or something.
Right, yep.
And here is my biggest disappointment of the set, grade D, which is normally win rate 45 to 46.75. For the last 5 sets, every single time there was the destroy a creature with flying variant in green in that slot, but I couldn't find a destroy creature with flying variant in the D slot in this particular set. So I had to go with the Thief of Existence, which at least destroys non-creature, non-land permanent, which is some sort of weird removal in green.
Well, that's interesting because there is a destroy target creature with flying, so that implies it's even worse than they usually are in this set.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because why would you have a flying creature in Chrysalis set?
Yeah, what an idiot. Put a flyer in your deck with a Chrysalis in this set?
Auxiliary is good. Let's be honest.
That is true. Yeah, that card is very good.
But yeah, that's what I have here. And Tornado from OTJ bonus sheet.
And then last one here, or second last one, grades D minuses. We've got 2. The theme here is red build-arounds that are kind of hard to make work and don't do all that much. So we've got Is It Generatorium
Perfect.
as the blue-red artifact from MH3 that makes extra energy and draws cards you've spent a lot of energy in a turn, and Brimstone Roundup, the thing that makes mercenary tokens. And the win rate for the D minuses is between 42 and 45%.
By the way, neither Alex knows what theme I selected, but also the more important part is that I keep the card from the previous set in the great description, delete the other one, and put the new one. Which means that there is a trend of getting those weird red build-arounds at D. There is a trend of getting the flyer removal at D. There is a trend of making like a underperforming burn spells at C-. So those things are across the sets, which is a nice additional layer of our set re-review. Then we have Fs, win rate below 42. Branching Evolution is an example from this set, although you can find many other ones. But I thought that this one maybe is worth putting because people still think that this card can be good. And problem with it is, of course, it's like a classical win more card. When it's good, you probably won the game without it, maybe even faster. And when it's not good, it's absolutely atrocious and you lose the game because you drew air, basically.
Yep, exactly.
And the other example is Key to the Vault, which is doesn't even promise anything.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything at all.
No. So this is how the grades look like when you plot all the sets from Midnight Hunt till now. It's approaching, I think, 4,000 and a bit cards in the data sets, and like only 0.5% of those will be A pluses. Currently we have, I think, 19 A pluses, so we're just shy of 4,000.
Nice.
2% of the cards will be like A's, 3% will be A minuses, 4.6% B pluses, and sort of similar amounts of B's. And then you got like 7% of B minuses, 10% will go to C plus. So probably 30, maybe 2% of the cards, close to 1/3 will be C plus and above. And then there is a lot of cards, like 40% of the cards are in this C minus, D plus grade. You'll get like 43% of the cards here. And 25% of the cards will be in the D minus, F kind of bracket of the cards. So that's how I divided those. There is a lot of grades that have very few cards in it, which are the high grades, because there will be very few of cards at the power level in the set. And there will be like a bulk of them in this middle value. So C plus is basically considered to be a solid card already in this kind of grading. But of course, every set is slightly different. And this set was particularly weird because there was very few C pluses. So here we have the same graph as before, but with MH3 added on separate layer. And if there's 10% of the cards in all sets are C pluses, only 6% of cards in MH3 were in the C plus bracket. And generally, there was not so many of these cards that were performing super well. So there's like a bit less of the Bs, a bit less of the B pluses. quite a lot fewer A minuses, and sort of on par for A's and A pluses. And par for A pluses is 1%, basically.
Nice.
What is super weird is that there is like 23% of all the cards are C's, when normally the number is close to 14. So almost like 50% more C's than you would expect. And then there is not much in this D plus D bracket. That's a bit less than you would expect. But there's more of those absolutely extreme ones like D minuses and Fs. And mind you that there's always some cards just don't have a win rate in 17 lands. I just completely discard those cards from the data analysis because there's no point. They were not played at all if they are not having a win rate number in 17 lands.
Yeah, the higher percentage of Fs and D minuses, that makes sense to me for sure, because there are a few more cards in the set that are constructed focused, have no chance at being good and limited. That's just the nature of a Modern Horizon set where they're looking to inject some power into Modern. The C's, though, that's an interesting one. There's not that I don't have some ideas, but it doesn't immediately strike me as like, oh, of course there's more C's. This is true about the set.
I think that there is something to be said about cards that are like B minus in one archetype and D in another archetype and are being played in both of those because of how people put them in their decks will average to a C. And I'm wondering how much of that is there.
Could be that.
Because this was a super synergy driven format. So maybe some cards were just played in the wrong decks. And because of that, the average sort of melanged out the subtleties of them being actually good in some archetypes and pretty bad in the others.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Now, this is something I started doing when the play boosters were introduced, and that was to take a look at what percent of the cards at the D plus grade or lower were at a given rarity, and so these should add up to 100%. And before the play boosters, it was roughly 40% of the D pluses or lower grades were commons, and then play boosters were released. There was trimming of the commons from the pack, fewer commons produced in the set, and the promise that we were given was that there will be fewer unplayable commons in the pack. That's why they can trim the number of commons, and that's why they can trim the count of the commons, because who cares that you have like one extra common when most of the time it's this plummet variant or something. So I decided to monitor it, and actually this time I went a bit deeper on it. I made a thread about it on Twitter. If you find it, just go through it. But generally, since Murders at Karlov Manor and OTJ, we've seen a decrease in the number of commons that were Ds and D pluses. They were only 27% of the D pluses and lower. And in this set, only 14% of the cards with a D plus or lower grade were at common, which is absolutely unprecedented before. So like 90% of the Ds and D pluses were uncommons and rares and mythics. But I decided that this metric is not particularly good because I don't care what percentage of D and D pluses are, or D pluses or lower are commons. I care what percentage of commons are D pluses or lower. And opposite, the numbers will look slightly differently. So I did exactly the same thing for all those sets. And like in Midnight Hunt, which was the extreme example, 56% of all the commons were at the grade of D plus or lower. And arguably, quite a lot of them were D pluses, but still. Average for the sets in the draft boosters was around 45% of the commons were in this D plus or lower grade, with an exception of DMU for some reason. And since we introduced play boosters, it dropped below whatever we were seeing before. Now, is it sustainable trend? I don't know. It's going to be, of course, I'm going to look at it every single set to add extra data points to see if the WotC did. But the truth of the matter is that only 18% of the commons in MH3 were caught in that D plus or lower grade kind of scale, which is interesting to see that we're seeing a promise from WotC sort of being kept. Did you notice that there is fewer of those kind of unplayable commons?
Yeah, for sure. I think, especially in MH3.
Or we just stopped playing C minuses.
Well, it could be that a little bit too. That is certainly a possibility. But I think that with MH3, it's definitely the kind of set where every card has a place. And I think while there's definitely a or every common and some of the uncommons, mostly at the common level, like what we're talking about, every card has a place where it can go. And sure, there is some room for user error, like we talked about, of like people putting cards in the wrong decks. But I think most of the cards kind of told you, oh, you should go in this deck, and people followed that, and that would make sense why, like, to me, this rate like being so much less, because I think it was designed, this set, Modern Horizon sets generally are designed from a drafting perspective of, yeah, we want every common here to be playable in the draft form and have a spot somewhere, even a little more so than in something like OTJ or MKM, where they might have to reprint some just very basic effect for standard or some sort of thing they want to construct it here and there.
But yeah, again, they sort of promised that those basic effects are going to be put on either on creatures if they're at common. So like you will have a creature that makes a plummet, which is better than having just a plummet.
Yep,
arguably. Or they will put it on uncommons because there are those 20 extra uncommons in the set. Fine, just put some of them. You will not see them as often in the draft, and you will not get those packs like LCI, I think, was a big offender for me, where I just had some packs where you just like see 6 unplayable commons, and you're thinking, yeah, well, that's not fun, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Who are these for? Is the question I'm always asking.
Me, I guess, because these are the only 6 left in the pack.
Yeah, exactly. I guess this is what I've been gifted.
Let's move on. Okay, so this is how the reality looks. Then this is how we predicted the set. So first of all, I mean, you can clearly see I put like a bunch of C pluses in a set where there were almost no C pluses.
That's funny, yeah.
So did you. We have this sort of similar shape of our curve. Mine was a bit more spiky. Alex, in the classic Alex style, put 40 Fs in but it's fine. There were 17 of them, so you're not far off. I put only 6. There were 17 of them. We're sort of like in the middle of our how harsh we are in grading things. You're still in your didactic mode when you're telling people, look, it might get a D-, but I want to warn you, this card is bad. And that's fine. I'm going to game that because Fs is the only place where I'm gaining advantage in the evaluations. So
it's funny. Like, I think the last 2 set reviews I've done, I've had Sirkovich's voice in the back of my head when I'm about to give something an F. I'm like, oh, maybe I should call this out as like, oh, I could see playing this in this kind of deck and give it a D-. And apparently, even still, I'm too harsh on the card. So
But you're only harsh on the Fs. Look here. I mean,
it's only on the Fs, but I think you raise a good point. Like you said, I do try to make sure that people aren't falling for these traps where they think these cards are great and they put it in their deck. But I also think there's room for me to be a bit more nuanced there. So just something to sit with.
We underscored them on C's, C-, D+, D's, and D-.
Yeah. Jeez.
So we're not super harsh in there. We're just super harsh on the Fs.
It's true.
And definitely not harsh enough on the B+, B+, and C+. This is like very weird that there's so few of those. There is like in total, 40, 50, 60, 6, maybe 70 B+ to C+ cards. That's not many. Like I would expect at least 100 of those in a set. So that set was really not kind to having like universally decent cards or universally decent plus to good cards. And that's a bit weird. And maybe this is something to do with synergy and how a card doesn't only need to be good on raid, but also playing with the rest of the deck. Otherwise, it will not be winning enough. And I think that might have been the situation we've encountered here. Right. So I told you that I changed the graphs, how I'm doing them. This is how we did them before. I selected all the cards where we had 0 misses, all the cards where we had missed by 1 mark, independent of the direction. All the cards we had missed by 2 marks. And by 2 marks, I mean, gave it a C-, it was a C+, or gave it a C+, it was a C-. That's by 2 marks. And all the cards that we had 3 marks, 4 marks, 5 and 6 marks. Last set we did actually pretty good because we only had like a couple of the 6 marks misses. And don't worry, you're still good. I'm
good.
so that's fine. But I decided that this is maybe not the best telling graph. I'd rather put them on the whole spectrum. So instead of that, for this set, I put them we miss by 0, and then they move on in different directions. So these are the cards that we undervalued with the minus, and these are the cards that we overvalued with the plus. And as you can see, if you draw a sort of like a bell curve around them, we have similar shapes of them, but mine is just 1 mark to the left. So I quite systematically overvalued everything by a mark. And that is the downfall of my evaluation. In the end, if I downgraded every single card I graded by 1 grade, we would have almost identical set reviews. But I didn't. So we don't.
And it's kind of funny. I remember actually as I was grading these cards, and for those who don't know, the way that this works basically is Sigurd sends me a spreadsheet. I try to grade it as early as possible without playing the cards, and I do that. But I fill in the spreadsheet right after the set review that I do with Mark, where these grades kind of come from, and I adjust a little bit from there. But anyways, I remember thinking I'm going to grade a little bit like the cards in kind of the C+, B- area. I'm going to grade those a little bit lower than usual, accounting for the fact that some people might put some cards in the wrong deck. So I don't know if that is exactly what's winning me points here, but the places that you might have gotten some stuff wrong, that might be the difference there, where I specifically for Modern Horizons made that distinction.
That is actually a very good tip for my next Modern Horizons evaluation, to get the edge on you, because it looks literally that we had this kind of like difference of a half a grade, and that's enough. And I think that this might be a thing to think about in the synergy-driven sets, how data is not really that helpful when you look at the individual cards' win rate without context, and maybe how you should go deeper into evaluating just how does the card perform in fully synergistic decks versus not fully synergistic decks, and find a metric for that. So yeah, this is just this is the bulk of the things. We hope that most of the values we are going to get are falling into plus minus 2 grades evaluation, and with decent job. I'm not very happy about how many cards I had overvalued by 3, 4, 5, 6 grades. That's way too much. I would be hoping to have like, maybe 4 or 5 cards 6 and above, and I have like 8. That's too much. And also bunch of them, like 50 cards with 3 or more grades evaluation. Also, what I'm not happy about is, even though you were more likely to undervalue cards, when it comes to big undervaluation, I'm still above, which I'm not happy with it. And I also was not super happy with how I played this set and this format. And it just shows you that the initial evaluation of the set is somewhat linked to how you perform in it. And I started on the wrong foot from the get-go. Apart from a glitch when I had like 70% win rate after 5 drafts, I went into a most horrible like run of the of any format I ever played in this. I think on Arena. And this has something to do with me fundamentally not understanding how the set works. Apart from the, synergistics grade, non-synergistics grade, there was something deeper at work in there, and indeed I could feel that there was something not correct. Yeah. While you are more or less on par for what you did before, so that's maybe slightly worse than the previous sets, but only very marginally.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you bring up, that your initial impressions can really deeply color how you play the rest of the set. When I play a set for a few days and people are like, "Oh, what are your big changes from what you originally thought about?" In your set review, I might have a card or two, but still a lot of my initial impressions, they're still what's at the forefront of how I evaluate cards for maybe another week or so, because I think it is hard to kind of break away from your initial impressions. That said, I think it's better for you to have some initial impressions and then maybe get some stuff wrong and adjust later, rather than the conclusion you might get to is like, well, you shouldn't evaluate beforehand. You shouldn't prepare. I think it's much worse to not prepare at all beforehand because, at least if you're onboarding yourself, learning the cards, reading the cards, learning, little the minutia, all the little text, like that kind of stuff. If you don't know that stuff, that's going to put you in a much worse place than, well, going in, evaluating a few things a little bit wrong and readjusting. So yeah, just an interesting little quirk of preset card evaluation.
I think that I found that you have a very good coping mechanism for that, and I'm going to tell you when we come to the cards, because I had a thought before the set re-review episode or whatever about you being super harsh on 2 cards, and then I found them in the data, so we're going to talk about it.
Okay, great.
But first, let's go to the biggest misses, and first we go with your miss, missed by over 6 or more grades.
Oof.
And we have Imskir, the Ion Eater. We both gave it a C+. And what did it end up?
Like a D minus?
F.
Oh my gosh, that bad! Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
It ended up being an F.
It can't be an F. I lost the card one time, so it can't be an F.
Well, F is it's still 42%.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it will win occasionally. That's
yeah. I know. I'm just slightly poking fun at people that always go, that card can't be that bad. I've lost to it.
But yeah, it just doesn't do enough for what it costs you. The archetype is really hard to go full synergy because it's hard to get good cards. It's like, okay, you can fill your deck with artifacts, just like hard to fill it with good artifacts.
Also, the abilities kind of fight with each other a little bit. Like Affinity isn't a mechanic that wants you to put a bunch of really cheap things in your deck so that you can power these things out early. But the 4 mana to sacrifice an artifact to deal damage, like that's a lot of mana for if most of your artifacts are little small things.
I guess they wanted to sacrifice a frog mirror that you cast for free.
Yeah, your frog mirror.
Didn't put the density for that. There was no density to get those kind of shenanigans.
Yeah, true.
If it would be reliably costing 3 mana, that card would have been probably good. But it's reliably costing 6 mana, and that's
not good. Yeah, very not good. And it's. Forget it. Sometimes it just kills you. You literally cannot cast it because you're like, look, I did the thing and I put so many artifacts in my deck. Oh wait, this thing's gonna deal me 7 points of damage and I'm just dead to their attacks, so I can't cast this card.
there you go. Like lots of wrong with it.
Yeah, lots.
And that's the end of Alex's missed grades by 6 or more.
Yay!
This is also one of my missed grades by 6 more, so we can skip it from my part.
Okay.
Cards that I missed, the Necrobloom.
Ooh.
And I was a lot of the optimism. I gave it a B because I thought, like a 2/7 makes tokens, goes wide. There are landscapes in the set, easy to splash. So I gave it like an optimistic B, but it was. You gave it an F. What do you think it was?
Probably ended up like a D- or something.
No, it's an F. Straight F.
Oh, it's a straight F. Okay, wow, great. Yeah, I can't say I've ever lost this card, so obviously that means that it's an F. Just going off what I just said.
We have a new heuristic. If Alex lost to the card, it's not an F.
Yep. Yeah, it just 2/7 for 4 mana. It's okay, but you're just not amounting to too much. If you make 1 zombie, are you that happy? Not that happy.
Yeah. Maybe I overvalued how good the 01 plants are.
The plants, yeah, that could be true.
Because I thought, it's in the counters colors. Maybe they would be like, I would put in counters on the plants and it would be happy times, but no. Then I have Corum the Undertaker. I gave it a B. By the way, this is one of the commander things. And it was super hard to evaluate those as well, because they're like so out of anything that the set does, really. You gave it a C+. I gave it a B. It turned out to be a D-.
D-? Yeah. 3 colors, no enter the battlefield effect. Sometimes was a small, like a 1/5 or a 2/5. So yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah. Here we have Harrigast Erupting Nullkite, the 9 mana 6/6 flying Eldrazi dragon. That in my head when I was evaluating was also drawing 3 cards every single time you cast it. Turns out A, it doesn't always draw 3 cards, and B, it's very clunky to cast it, even with the emerge, because I guess that red didn't have that great targets for emerging, so it was problematic. You gave it a C, I gave it a B+, and it was a D+, so I missed it by 6 cards.
just like an okay thing to ramp into in your Eldrazi decks. The emerge and the when you cast this spell, exile your hand to draw 3 cards. That kind of fights against itself because emerging is like, oh, I want to power this out quickly, but you're not going to be empty-handed generally. So yeah, just a little awkward.
Ashling. I thought, well, maybe there is some kind of a spells deck that it would be good in. I'll give it a B. You gave it a C minus. You were right.
Nice.
I mean, you were right in the way it was closer. It was a D,
It's a D.
In the end, so I missed it by 6 grades. Again, this card, probably I had too much of a like standard kind of level set evaluation goggles on. I should have been more. I looked at the rarity symbol a bit too much in this particular case, I think.
Yeah, I think part of the card's issue is that whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, discard a card, then draw a card. Full stop. It's not a mate. You have to. So like that can be a little bit awkward. You're like forced to discard. It also means that if you're empty-handed, you get to draw a card, which is the upside in it. But it never really happened like that. And of course, it's got the I'm a 4-mana 4/4 no enter the battlefield effect problem. So
yep. Well, you can always not lose the mana or something.
True.
Kozilek, the Broken Reality.
Ooh.
I was like pretty bullish that this one is a good one because, well, you can maybe ramp it out very quickly, and then in the dream scenario they discard 2 cards, sort of. You get like 2 additional 5/4s, but it never happens because it's always the last card that you're going to cast. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Realistically, unless you got the unsealing or something and you drew 3 cards and you stack the triggers right. Card is annoying when you play against it, but I had like white-green grindy deck. I had like really, really long games against the Kozilek that resolved on turn 6 and would have won it if not for the fact that they had the falter, and that's how they managed to finally get through my defenses. But it was not like impressive or anything. They discarded 2 cards from my hand, but they were both creatures, so I just flipped them at a certain stage, and it was fine. The fact that their chrysalises were bigger was annoying. But,
yeah, that was the annoying part.
But I could block them at that stage. That was fine. So yeah, A was definitely overdone. And the end was a C. So you were really, really close in your evaluation. Nice. You were like, and I'm sure that there were decks where it was an A level card, but it must have been played in so many decks where it was just not good at all. And that will, definitely the decks where it was an A were few and far between, while the decks where it was just like a C plus maybe were probably the most common version of the Kozilek deck.
Yeah.
Idol of the False Gods. You gave it an F.
Did.
You're harsh. I gave it a B minus because I'm dumb for kinds of cards like that. And also I played it way too much, which is something else. In the end, it was a D minus.
Close.
So yeah, there is Alex classic F. Cautionary tale. Don't put it in your deck. Probably will be a D minus, and indeed it is a D minus. And the last one, I think. I hope. Please don't stop.
Yeah, a lot of missed by 6+ grades here.
I think he's dead now. No, I mean this is sort of on par for what we did in the first set reviews. Just the last one was so good in our in terms of how we managed to hit all the cards, especially given that the OTJ had like 700 cards or something. We managed to only hit like 5 of them in total, missed by 6 grades or more. The last one is the Golden Tail Trainer, another classic card that will be a trap for me. It has counter synergies. I cannot say no to that. Again, just the fact that aura and equipment spells were absolutely irrelevant, and the discount on their cost was also absolutely irrelevant. The only equipment that could use a discount was in red, so why would you even play that thing? And boosting power of that thing was also not super easy, so it didn't have good attacks. It was more like a one-time attack kind of thing. You gave it a D, I gave it a B minus. It was a D minus. In fact, nice. You overgraded it with a D. And there you go. Yeah, that's it. I finished my humiliation circle. Don't worry, we have like a one quick run through some cards where we missed by a little less. So our absolute performance in OTJ, that looking at absolute grade miss. So I don't care if we overrated it or underrated it, just how big was the gap between our grade and the actual score. At common last set, we were roughly 1.2 away of a grade. At uncommon, we were roughly 1.7. And at rare, we were also around 1.7. What do you think in this set?
Ooh, like just a lower or higher than last, or do you want me to give you like a number? Or
Yeah, lower, higher.
I'm gonna say.
Don't you dare to say that you're gonna be lower and I'm gonna be higher, because
No. I wouldn't split the difference. I was gonna give a general and all-encompassing grade. I'm gonna say we were lower than usual.
So at common, it's like relatively close to what you did.
Yeah.
At uncommon, you are better and I'm worse.
Okay.
Than I used to be. Oh no, I'm actually also lower. A bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's yeah.
I was particularly I'm roughly the same. And at rare mythic, that's where I made my misses. Like this is the rarities where I did a lot of doo-doos at higher rarities. Here's majority of the difference in our grading comes from that, which is makes sense. Commons are closer at the power level between themselves, so it's harder to make a miss. I mean, you can probably plump a generous D+ on any common and you'll not be terrible in those evaluations. While with rares, you have a range from A to F, basically. You did pretty well on rares, specifically in this set. You did much better than I think on any other sets with rares in terms of how far you were in the absolute performance. But of course, absolute performance will tell you how far we were from the grading. But what I like to do is look at the sort of net performance. So if you overhit something on one card and underhit something on the other card, you sort of are on 0.
Right.
But if you constantly overhit on things, you will start accruing those points. So I look at the sort of relative performance. Despite the saying absolute grade miss, it's actually a relative grade miss. I was even aware of that. I just didn't feel like redoing all the bloody graph because I would have to, because I deleted them. But in OTJ, we both overshot on every single category of the cards. I overshot more, so I was more the hooray optimistic person in the last set. You had more misses in the other direction, which sort of brought you closer to 0.
Okay, fair enough.
So what do you think we're going to see in MH3?
I'm going to say that... Can I say I'm a split grade now? Can I say...
now it's fine. Now it's fine.
I'm going to say I think I improved to compare to OTJ. I won't say anything about you, but the listener can figure out the implication.
So when we look at the misses in both directions at common, we were actually super close to being spot on. You were like 0.1 grades away on average. I'm 0.25 grades away from the thing. Now, what I was super hooray optimistic was uncommons and rares, and I overrated them by a big chunk. Well, you were, as you said, you were closer to 0, which would mean that you basically nailed it with some mistakes on both sides, basically. You were super close. You're like half a grade at uncommon and barely more than half a grade on rare mythic level.
Yeah, and
I
would assume
widely overshooting every single thing on the higher rarity. This is a good result for the commons.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, yeah, we're both very, very close to like 0. Like that's really good. And I would assume that with the uncommons and rares, it just goes back to what I was saying about a lot of the high rarity cards just go in certain decks or need something to tick. Like the example that I just comes to mind right now is Aether Revolt. Like Aether Revolt's a really powerful card, but you need a lot of energy cards to make that card work. So what you might have graded it or I might have graded it, and how it performed for you or I might not be what the average performance would be for a 17 lands user.
Yeah, I think is it what was that? Is it Performatorium or something?
No, the Generatorium.
Generatorium. That's an extreme example of that, because that card was, I'm guaranteeing you that it was played in so many decks where it didn't have any business of being.
Absolutely.
but yeah, Aether Revolt will appear a bit later. So.
Okay, sweet.
Yep. And then, of course, looking at rarities is interesting, but not. I thought it would be also good to look at how we missed on cards with colors. And of course, this set was a bit problematic with evaluating on colors because bunch of devoid, bunch of multicolor, hybrid, whatever cards. It was complicated to get the data. I still got it. But in OTJ, we were quite okay with white, black, and green in evaluating it. And both of us, we missed in blue and red. And in multicolor, there's always a bit more missing because those are harder to predict. But yeah, 3 colors we did really good in predicting what they're going to be like in terms of power. And blue and red, the weaker colors, we probably overestimated how good it's going to be. What do you think in this set, especially for yourself?
I think, let me just think back to how...
Did you have like colors where you were like super close and colors where you missed more, or do you think that it was more or less par?
I think I was pretty much on where things landed. I might have been too low on blue, actually. I would assume that's my guess. My guess is everything's about right, a little too low on blue, and maybe too high on black.
Right. Well, you are sort of like blue is one of your closest to 0.
Okay.
You rated by like 0.1 grades, which is not terrible in any kind of sense or imagination. You were a bit higher on green compared to the other colors. And definitely multicolors, there was quite large miss, but they're notoriously hard to evaluate.
Yeah.
Now here I over-evaluated across board, which this we could see in that graph that I showed where we showed 2 different distribution of our grades. Now we know that it was mainly driven by rares, but it was not driven by colors. So my overshooting was not specific that, I was super high on Golgari, and because of that, I missed in the set. I was too high on rares and uncommons across board, independently of the color. Yes, I was a bit closer to reality with white and blue, and a bit further with black, red, and green. But generally, it shows that I made a systematic error rather than specific concentrated. Because you could also imagine that I had blue and white spot on, and the massive overrating of red and green because I don't know, I was super high on Gruel and didn't pan out or something.
Right.
That was not the case in this set. It was a systematic error, which is good because that's an easiest one to adjust. You just lower it down, and I think we sort of identified what was the problem. I evaluate synergistic card on the best case scenario when I should evaluate them on average scenario, which will mean the card is going to be misplayed by quite a lot.
Right.
And that's the next time I see a synergistic set, I should tweak my my grades a bit lower because I will know that good cards will be diluted by misplaying them in the wrong builds. Right, I have a couple of more big misses that I overrated by 5 grades or more. Shield Gengar, the big dragon.
Yep.
Eladamri. Did you ever play it?
I did, and so this one has, I don't know if we have if you wanted to get into the how much did we get this wrong by exactly for, I guess you have there +5. But Eladamri is an interesting one because, like, you read the card and there's nothing really wrong with it. It's honestly one that usually you have a card or 2 per set that's like this. It's one that surprises me how poorly it actually performed because I don't think there's anything. The one thing I think is wrong with it is the double pips. Like one of the card evaluation trends that you'll find is anything that costs less than 4 mana and has double pips is worse than you think because you're just not going to cast it on curve nearly as often as you think you might. But aside from that, like, there's nothing about the card that makes me go, people are using that wrong, or I didn't realize this was bad about the card. Still seems like a pretty good card to me.
And I mean, Warren Soul Trader doesn't seem like a good card to you?
That would a little bit less. I mean, like, Soul Trader needs setup. It needs you to, like, want to sacrifice things or care about, making mana. Eladamri just draws cards on the top of your deck.
That's true. Well, at a cost. I mean, you need to tap 2 creatures.
You need
Oh
to
yeah, you mean okay, yeah.
to put a card in, yeah. But from the top, you can just draw your cards.
Ether Revolt. That card is so good when you build a deck around it. It's like when you draw it, you basically always win if you have a Ether Revolt deck, unless they destroy Ether Revolt, which is a good sign that the card is good in those decks.
Exactly. Yeah, the card is very strong, and I mentioned a second ago you really want to have a lot of energy, something in the neighborhood of, if it's anybody still playing MH3 and wants the numbers, I think something in the neighborhood of like 12 or more energy cards, but also really good to have cards that make energy repeatedly, like the Battle Wagon, for example. Or for, the best thing is like you play the Battle Wagon into this and you can just activate it right away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think that for future references, I'm already preparing a graph for the new. There's the new Augur of Bolas in Bloomsboro.
Oh, yep.
And people will be playing it, and they will.
Oh, yeah.
And they will watch the bottom 4 cards of their library so frequently because you need so many cards to make that card, a reliable source of card draw. And I think that shorthand for Ether Revolt cards is going to be: imagine this is the Augur of Bolas.
Mm-hmm.
And any energy producer is an instant or sorcery spell. That's how many you want in your deck in order for that card to be good. Which 12 is probably like on the short, on the low estimate of how much you need.
Yeah, I would say so too, actually. Not like when you put it in those terms of like how many do you need to not make your Augur hit. By the way, for those not familiar with the Augur of Bolas thing, it's Augur's a 2-mana 1/3 that looks at the top 3 cards of your library and takes a spell, an instant or sorcery. And people always underestimate how many spells you need in your deck to consistently hit and not just make it a 1/3.
So the joke was, of course, that Augur's ability is ETB, look at the bottom 3 cards of your library, because you look at the top cards, you don't find an instance, you put them on the bottom, you move on with your life.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I think that the new Augur of Bolas is going to be really, really bad, because I don't see the density of instant sorceries in the new set that will allow it to be even remotely playable in limited. Maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you're putting in your prediction now. We'll see. We'll see next in 3 months or whatever.
Okay, another miss, and I've also said like Wrath of the Skies. I gave it like I think an A-, and it turned out to be like a C+ maybe or something. That card is not bad.
No, that's one that I kind of lucked into the right grade here because I gave it a pretty lowish grade for I was kind of think I maybe talked myself down on it. But I think the card is very good. It's just one of those cards that its win rate's going to be lower than it seems. So whatever the raw power level of the card is in the hands of a good player, because I think a little too often people are just going to put it in their white kind of attacking deck, right? Not a deck that actually wants a Wrath effect.
Yeah, I think like Archway of Innovation, that the problem with that card was that people actually tried to build around it, which was a very big mistake, because I thought, okay, how bad a grade can I give to it? It's like basically an island. I mean, it will have a sort of average win rate, but no, because people tried to build an Archway of Innovation decks and play it, then that lowered that win rate significantly because it was in a very bad blue decks. Eldrazi Ravager, Dreadmobile, I think that both of those cards have a similar theme for me. It's like these were the sort of slow kind of value tools in a format that has either explosive starts or inevitability. So they were like they were too slow against those decks that do something super crazy in the first 3 turns. And they were too meh for the decks that were going like, oh, I'm doing something big at the end.
Yeah.
So they were outplayed from both flanks, and because of that, they sort of like didn't deliver. Make sense?
Yeah, I think so too. It's just a little bit too finicky. Like the Ravager, especially, it's kind of like a halfway ramp target for the Eldrazi decks. It's like, okay, you're putting all your mana into this, and it's not this gigantic thing that's got a good ETB. It's just like a pretty big thing that just kind of dies. So you really just want to be going a little bit bigger if you're ramping into something.
Well, maybe sacrifice 1 Eldrazi instead of sacrificing 2.
Yeah, something like that.
Rebuy something. There's some tweaks. And then it's like Branching Evolution, because I gave it a C-, I think, and it was an F.
Yep.
And then These Are the Restless, another of those commander cards. Just
did you ever see a Tarmogoyf token on the battlefield?
I did.
Oh, I never got to. So
I did. I got attacked by Dissad Restless once and saw against me the Tarmogoyf token,
nice.
but I killed the opponent next turn. So.
Yeah, I mean, sounds about right for that
And
card.
endurance again. Endurance is the, I guess, Eldamri kind of problem. It's like, how bad can a 3/4 flash reach card be?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not impressive. It's the middle kind of the way trap that it has.
Yep, agree.
Now you have some of your extra misses.
Ooh, okay.
There is Eladamri. There is Reiterating, and these are the two cards that I see you bash on the stream quite frequently. And I thought this is actually a good coping mechanism for missing an evaluation. Imprint it in your brain by bashing those cards on the stream and then telling how bad they are, because you know that you missed on them. And don't get me wrong, I think it's an excellent mechanism that you're doing for the sort of reinforcing the idea that these are the cards I'm likely to overestimate.
Yeah.
I better make sure that I send the message, don't overestimate those kind of cards.
Yeah, and it's not even just me, it's for others, because my kind of thought process is, well, if I overestimated the card, then I'm sure there's somebody out there that also is going to do the same. So I really just want to kind of hook them with that. Like, part of what I think makes me a kind of like not exactly a unique content
Alex
creator,
dancing on the edge of hubris there.
oh yeah, part of what makes me great as a Magic creator. No, I was looking for a more specific word than great. I was looking for a part of what makes me, I think, an effective communicator as far as Magic goes.
A proficient evaluator.
Yeah. Is kind of knowing where people's baselines are generally. I know what people are going to think about certain cards, certain archetypes, and I can go from there. So if I can go, I think this is going to be overrated or underrated, I can kind of swoop in before the thought of, ooh, why did you take that card comes in. I can be like, I know you're thinking it already, so I'm going to point it out and say how much I dislike Reiterating Bolt for whatever reason.
But no, I thought that it was a great mechanism, because those specific cards I saw you, I noticed that during the streams that you were like always saying that these cards are bad, and these two specifically somehow stuck in my head, and like, wow, he's really harsh on those cards. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, they are bad, but I mean, no need for that violence. And then I look at the data and I say, oh no, there is need for the violence. There is a backstory there that I didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The On Do Not Master arc that Alex was walking on the
Yeah.
Also subtlety, because how bad can a 4-mana free flash flying be?
That one still surprises me. Like, that card is just strong. Like, it reads like a strong card. It's a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
I guess maybe,
I mean, it looks better than the Condor, arguably.
Yeah, for sure, I think better than the Condor. Although we also rated the Condor pretty highly. But subtlety, maybe it's a matter of people not spending their mana when the opponent doesn't cast something they can counter. Maybe there's not enough opportunities. You know, the opponent casts a living weapon or a spell. So I definitely could be overrating the card, but this is one of the cards that still looks good to me today.
Yeah. And we would have to look, and maybe the top players are playing it better. Then the misses in the other direction. There is going to be significantly fewer of those.
Yeah.
I underestimated Volatile Stormdrake, and I think I finished playing the format, because I might still play a couple of drafts or something, but largely finished playing MH3. I had enough. Life has beaten enough of willingness to play that format out of me. But I think, undervalued the Volatile Stormdrake. That card is good.
Yeah, it's good. Part of it
makes it good. Like, there's not so many Bs in this set. This is like a B.
Yeah, and it's, we were talking about just like generically good versus needing synergy. This is one of the generically good cards. You don't need other energy cards. I think even it might be a little bit higher on like a better win rate if you told everybody, if Arena sent you a message when you drafted this card that said, pro tip, you can cast Volatile Stormdrake on turn 2 if you want to, if the opponent has no other creatures in play, and it stays a 3/2 flyer. Like, that's another part of the card that I think I kind of underrated when I was first rating.
Yeah, I completely didn't get, because I'm used to playing with the Gilded Drake.
Me too.
Like what as one does. And you couldn't do that there. But definitely you can do that with this one. Collective Resistance, I undervalued that by 5 grades.
Yeah.
The card turned out better than I expected. And I'm especially angry because in the last set there was a very similar card in white, and I overvalued it, and I corrected that overvalue, and this time it's good.
Which
Bastards.
one? Which one in the last set are we talking about?
There was the white thing that destroys an artifact, destroys an enchantment,
Oh, put
and
counters on your stuff. That's the other
yeah.
mode. Yeah, yeah. I underrated this one too, and I think I was actually just thinking about this the other day. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe because I read it in order of like, oh, it's a sideboard card, like kill enchantment, kill an artifact. Oh, nice little ending, additional mode of protection. But that protection mode's really, really good, and it's that first, and then the other parts of the card.
And like you always will have the path through annihilation, which is something that you really want to be killing. Or
Yeah,
there's a bunch of, there's, especially enchantments, were like very nice targets. And when the artifact mode is important, it is really important because then you're playing against like a full blown artifact deck, so you always have a target for that.
yeah.
And Satya, I think that I underestimated that this card is really, really strong.
Yeah, in a sea of really bad commander cards, Satya was a very, very good commander card. It's kind of like a 4-mana calamity, if you want to make a OTG comparison.
That's a good comparison, I think. And I sort of I took the wrong ones up, and I undervalued this particular one. Then I took 3 misses that are probably responsible for majority of the trophies I had in this format. Guide of Souls. That card is. I gave. It was not like a terrible miss. I gave it like a B. It just turned out to be an A plus.
Yeah, I missed on it a little bit. I think I gave it an A minus.
You gave it an A minus, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. It's just one of the best cards we've ever seen on Arena. Basically, like it's just really, really, really strong.
Like, I played a deck, and on turn 2, I played. So turn 1 Guide of Souls, turn 2 Raptor, hit another creature that gives me energy, attack with the Guide of Souls as a 3/4 flyer. That was my turn 2. And I won that game, believe it or not. Ocelot Pride, on the other hand, was a constant source of disappointment for me because I played it several times, and I never, I think, managed to keep it past turn 1. It always gets galvanic bolted or something.
Somehow.
And the irony, of course, the Sneaky Snacker is another card that I did really well with in this set, and had a lot of fun wins with that. But I misevaluated it, despite playing with it in early access and actually smashing with it. I don't know why. I just assumed that the black-blue is going to be weaker as a color pair in general.
Yeah,
generic.
That reminds me of the tweet. Like you were talking about your early access, and you faced LSV with like, did he have like a bunch of chrysalises or something in his deck? And you
no, he had Flage.
Flage, that's right. Yeah, you had a good deck, but he had Flage.
Yeah, that's I had 5 Sneaky Snackers there. So Alex, your big misses. That's 2 cards: Storm Drake, as we talked, and Cameo of Jealous Thirst, that you, I think, gave a pretty bad grade in general. It turned out to be fine. It's not great. It's okay.
Yeah.
Plus even maybe.
I talked about the Storm Drake a little bit. The Kami, I'm not sure exactly why I gave it such a low grade, because if you think about, I mean, I think it probably deserves a lowish grade just as far as what we were talking about with, if we're just normalizing for how well is this going to perform in the average 17 lands hands, or 17 lands players' hands, probably a little bit less good than in the hands of somebody who, like me, likes to draft blue-black a lot. But if you just put it in the context of blue-black, it's like a vampire spawn that blocks better and has the...
It's exactly how I put it in my head for that.
Yeah.
That's like, I wish that vampire spawn would be 1 free death touch. I wouldn't have a problem with that. And if I activate it once, which I will, it is.
Yeah. No, card solid.
All right, so I did this little thing for the end of it where I also normalized the win rates for the top players and the bottom players and compared which cards had the biggest grades between top players and the bottom players.
Nice.
So I can leave this overblown theoretical introduction. And some of the cards we've seen before, some of them not. But these are the cards that were doing better with top players. And specifically Arena of Glory, the B- grade in top players' hands, and only a D in the bottom players. And that was a bit interesting for me to see that. that decide the biggest delta between the top and the bottom players.
Yeah,
I guess.
Just agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, no.
All I was gonna say is I was just talking to somebody about this card yesterday. Actually, funny. Where I think a lot of people haven't, even at this point in the format, clocked this as a pretty solid card. I think maybe exerting it seems kind of like intimidating. Maybe it's too big of a cost. But to be fair, I would assume that the reason why it's performing worse in the hands of good players, or sorry, in worse players, is because one of the, going back to trends we've seen sets time after time, is that cards that require planning over multiple turns tend to be better in the hands of good players, which of course makes sense. And Arena asks you, are you okay spending this land and having it not on tap next turn for the haste boost this turn? Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. It's just better to cast your spells. So I think that makes sense to me.
Also, I mean, I'm not saying that it's autobiographical, but sometimes you just forget to activate it because it looks like a bloody mountain.
Exactly.
Same with Spymaster's Vault. This one also had a big difference between.
I love that card.
Yeah, it is. I never played it actually. Neither have I played against it, which is weird because I played against the whole host of cards. We have Volatile Stormdrake, so maybe we just. No, there's no good explanation what we did. We evaluated the card as well as it would be in the hands of a weaker player, while the job was to evaluate it as an average player would. But yeah, top players have a B- card, Volatile Stormdrake, and it's a D+ in the hands of the 50% win rate player. And Thief of Existence. Here, I think the underestimation of how not trivial it is to get that colorless mana so early in the game and putting it just like any other creature. Oh, you really need to have colorless sources to play this type of card.
Yeah, and then when you do cast it, like, it can be pretty solid. Like, sometimes you nab something pretty good, but sometimes you cast it and it doesn't actually exile something. And I don't know, like, I think I kind of glossed over this text when I first was evaluating it, maybe, but I kind of like forgot about the when this leaves, target opponent draws a card. Like, that's not a good line of text. Like, that is
only if you nab something, yeah.
Yeah, only if you nab something. True. But like, even still.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like their take on the apparition hunt, whatever the white removal. Instead of getting an illusion, you get a card. They give a card. But my whole hypothesis that the Thief of Existence is there because of the pip is a bit half-cooked, because if we look at let's finish these cards. Reef Worm and Ether Revolt. We discussed those cards at length. Better players do better with them. They are not like amazing. They're still a C and in the hands of the 60% win rate players. But they're D- in the hands of the beginner players. And I think that lack of plan, lack of density of the required cards for Ether Revolt, these are going to be contributing towards that.
I think probably Ether Revolt's better than a C2. Like, I think even in the hands of good players,
still they don't have enough density.
Either that, or they're putting it into like red-white aggro decks. And I think one of the things, I think it was somebody in my Discord, Danelius, pointed out like how bad the card is in red-white specifically. Like, you just don't want this, and you just like some attacking for.
But because you want to cast your energy-giving cards before you go to 4 mana.
Yeah, that too, exactly.
I did the game length analysis, and Boros decks have a horrific win rate when you go past turn 8.
Yes.
And Ether Revolt wants to have games that go that long. And
yeah,
that's
pretty
just
long.
Incompatible between the two plans.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the cards that are doing better with the bottom tier players. So like Ophiomancer is an A for 50% win rate players. While top players, it's just merely a C+, which is a solid card, but nothing to sing songs about.
I almost wonder, like, the first thing that pops into my mind with that, like, thinking, why is it so much better? Is I almost wonder if it's just inexperience playing against Ophiomancer. Because I remember the very first time I played against Ophiomancer. This was in Cube, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago or something at this point. Like, I was like, oh, okay, it's a 2/2 that comes in with a death touch thing. I'll just attack in, they'll trade, and we'll be on. Oh, no, it's every upkeep. Oh, do they just get another one? Okay. Like, it was just a matter of reading comprehension. But, and I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on.
I think a bit of that, but also looking at the second card on the list, the Shield Gengar. It's something about threat control. I think that Ophiomancer, when it is allowed to stay on board, is a problem, and it becomes a much better card the longer it stays on board, because the likely it is to accrue some sort of value. Shield Gengar is like good when it survives. The problem is it doesn't. So in the games that I'm playing normally, either opponent playing it against me, I'll kill it. I play it against an opponent, they kill it most likely. If they don't, they lose, but most of the time they do. And maybe in those lower tiers, those things survive longer, and therefore Shield Gengar becomes a B and not a D, not a D plus, like in the case of top players who are playing against people who know how to reserve removal for that kind of threat, how to manage the board so that they don't have to kill everything on site. And again, sequencing comes in mind, like you plan how to kill things. And yeah, probably in case of Ophiomancer, it's a combination of the two. But yeah, A is quite high. But this is also for, if you know, if you are the 50% win rate player and you're playing mainly, gold plat, you should know that Ophiomancer probably will do better for you than the win rate might suggest. Same with Eldrazi Linebreaker, which completely blows out of the water my argument about the colorless mana being tricky in Thief of Existence case. It's an A- card for the bottom players. This is another kind of threat. If this stays on board, it's going to win the game. The problem is it never does, because it's 3 toughness and you just kill it with anything. But if it stays on board, all your spawns become like a 5-1 attackers, and eventually opponent will run out of blockers and you're going to win that game. So I think that it's the same kind of scenario, and similar with Voltstrom Angel being a B plus and just a C for top players. Like, I was not very impressed about that card, but it seems it wins games in lower tier games.
Yeah, and one thing I think I might have mentioned this on a previous episode, is that I think flyers generally just play better in lower ranked games, because the problem with flyers in kind of higher ranked games where people are very streamlined decks they're going to be inherently smaller than anything else, right? So if your opponent has a really good red white aggro deck, the flyers get a little bit worse. If your opponent, like you said, knows how to manage their removal a bit better, the flyer gets a little bit worse because your 2-mana removal spell kills their 5-drop creature. So when the games kind of stall out and people are maybe not making as many attacks as they should be making, a flyer can really start to take over.
Oh. And we'll see. Maybe if a flyer could give a small boost to ground creature, that would improve how flyers are. Segue to Bloomborough.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, this is it. That's what I prepared for the slides for today.
Nice.
Hopefully, it was an interesting journey into my incompetence as a card evaluator. I promise to improve for the next time. And before we go, Alex, do you have anything to plug? I know that you have a very exciting week to come, and I will try to compete with you, at least on the part of it, I think.
Yeah. I guess to plug, if you want to see some card analysis in action, I'm going to be streaming on my Twitch stream 5:00 on Monday, the 22nd. Commons and Uncommon set review with my set review partner Mark, and then we're doing the rares mythics the next day on the Tuesday. Then on the Wednesday, there's early access, which both me and Sirgovitz are going to be taking part in. So pick your poison of who you want to watch doing that. But I think that's about it. It's been interesting. Like, I'm seeing you so soon after I failed the last one, after OTJ. Just 2 months, and
yeah,
it's going to come in 2 months again. We're going to see at the end of Bloomborough. The sets don't stop coming at this point. They just keep pumping them out.
No, it's just like it's mind blowing to me that I mean, for me, like, the summer holiday didn't start, and the autumn set is coming.
Right. Exactly.
I will be recording our skeletons things, which is a sort of different approach toward the set review, also on Tuesday. Normally, we try to compete with your commons and uncommon set review, but this time we tried to do it on your rares and mythics.
Nice.
Hopefully we can win with that one. And Wednesday probably going to do some early access, couple of drafts until my computer doesn't give up or something. And yeah, with that, thank you very much for joining, Alex, again. And yeah, give Alex a follow. And
Yeah, thanks.
I'll see you next Tuesday for the skeleton stream.
Yeah, thanks
With
for having me
Jason.
on. As always, been a blast.
Yeah.